With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, the complexities of the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan regulation. We'll have more on that, but our main topic of the show today, the use of propane in agriculture. The Propane Education and Research Council, or PERC, invited me to its event in Napa County this week, where it presented Fisher Vineyards with a sustainability award. Now, later in the show, I will be talking with Rob Fisher about the award and also about other things like how wildfire impacts his business, which is very timely with the Point Fire and Sites Fire burning just miles away from his vineyards. That is coming up later in the show, but we start with Mike Newland, Director of Agriculture Business Development for the Propane Education and Research Council. We are here in the Sonoma County, Napa area today. Tell me, what are we doing out here and why this area?
So we came to California to present an award to a local vineyards, and we highlighted Fisher Vineyard and the work that they're doing and their sustainability efforts. They are very focused on being sustainable, being environmentally friendly, and in addition to that, obviously the reason we're interested in them is they're using propane in a number of applications around the vineyards, and we wanted to highlight those.
Right, and we got to tour the vineyard and see some of the ways that they're using propane, and it's very interesting. And our listeners will get to hear about that a little bit later on in the show too. We go into detail in some interviews, but give me your perspective when you were out there today, seeing the ways that this was being used. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think, walking in, you knew what it was going to be because we've talked to them a number of times leading up to the event. I was really impressed with their entire operation. What a first-class operation that they run. Family, second generation, sixth decade, I believe, that they're in business at the same location. So I was thrilled to see the details, the things that really matter to them were highlighted in their facilities and also in their product. So the things that we did see out there were things that, maybe depending on where you're at in the country, you might not think about propane running. But one of the big things that I think we want to highlight would be the frost prevention fans that they use within the vineyard. So the cold air does settle down low when they have cold weather. So those fans, I believe, were set to come on at 38 degrees and run and move that air to keep frost from settling on the vines and on the growing fruit.
I found that to be very interesting too, and it was brought up while we were touring that it looks like what you would see out in an orange grove, if you can imagine that kind of a fan. And right there was the propane tank, which makes it very handy. You know that this is going to work, even if you happen to not have electricity that night, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the big reason. I mean, it takes a lot of power to turn those big blades. And you're exactly correct. The citrus industry does use a similar product as well from the same companies that sell these. So yeah, it's great to have the energy stores stored right there next to the engine that's using it. The electric grid where we're standing isn't ultra reliable. And that was something that the Fisher family highlighted in their discussion was, not only do they have planned outages due to forest fires around them, but they also have a lot of unplanned things and the critical nature of their operation during harvest, during processing, and fermentation. They have to have power. And one of the applications we highlighted today, and one of the reasons we really came out here to present them the award was they had just installed a new 150 kW backup power generator that runs on propane. So that was really nice to see, and it was something, a nice application for us to highlight.
Yeah. Tell me about the award. What was the award and why were they chosen for it?
Yeah, so we presented them with the first Agriculture Energy for Everyone Hero Award, and it really has to do with their sustainability efforts and the commitment that they've made to being sustainable on their operation, but also the commitment that they've made to propane and being sustainable and being carbon friendly. So for those folks who don't know, propane is incredibly clean, one of probably the cleanest commercially available fuel or energy source that you can purchase for your farm. And so we wanted to highlight them. They're using it really for, we mentioned the frost prevention fans, the backup power we mentioned. They're also using it for boilers, which produces heat for their processing, and also their HVAC system, obviously.
So they're getting a lot of uses out of it. Is that normal to see around agriculture, to see it used in several different ways?
It really is. Once you have propane on the farm, we typically see multiple applications. So propane, grain drying, we are very dominant in that space. Drying grain across the Midwest, nuts, out in the West Coast here, hops up in the Pacific Northwest. So we do incredibly well there. Building heat, livestock, we just dominate that space as well, along with greenhouses for plants and cannabis these days. And then the frost prevention fans could be our highest market share market. It's not a huge market from a volume standpoint, but we do incredibly well in that space as well.
So for people who are listening who'd like to get some more information, is there a website they can go to?
Absolutely. Propane.com has all things propane. What we didn't mention is one of the big reasons we came to Fisher was they had applied for an incentive. PERC does give away incentives, farm incentives, and they were able to earn an incentive and actually a double amount on their incentive because of the forest fires that had impacted their area a couple years ago. So all the details, if you're going to put new equipment on the farm, I'd encourage folks to go to propane.com/farm incentive. All the details and amounts and all the fine print is there, and we'd encourage everybody to take a look at that. We'd love to pay you an incentive if you're putting new equipment on the farm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me, and thank you for bringing me out here today.
Absolutely. We really enjoyed it. Great day.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Let's talk about LEP. What are the key benefits of your products for farmers in the Western Zone?
So Live Earth Products, we mine and manufacture a ingredient called humate. Now, humate is rich in organic acids called humic acid and fulvic acid. Now, those are common components in your soil organic matter. And here in the Western United States, unlike those places around the Mississippi going east, actually have very low organic matter. Now, your organic matter is key think of it as the pantry in the soil. So it's key to water retention, nutrient cycling, microbial activity, those kind of things. So anything that's going to impact the increase in soil organic matter will also impact things like water holding capacity and nutrient holding capacity, which is a big deal here in the West when water is not as abundant as it is in the east side of the United States.
Now, what about nitrate? I know nitrate can be a problem in some soils. So how do LEP products help reduce the nitrate problem on saturated soils?
So Live Earth Products, it's not unique in how we affect nitrogen, but any organic matter will help retain nitrogen. So typically, the mechanisms that we use are blending the nitrogen with the humate. So what happens is the nitrogen will attach to the humic acid, and you will see less of the processes that degrade or volatilize nitrogen. So nitrogen will either convert to a gas, or it'll be converted by microbes into a nitrate and leach to the soil. So the longer you have that product is not being volatilized or converted, it's a longer opportunity for that nutrient to be used by the plant. We have university testing that has shown that when you blend these organic acids with the nutrient, you give that plant a longer opportunity to use that nutrient before it's lost, volatilized, or converted.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with today's AgNet West headlines, here's Brian German.
Industry groups recently participated in a bipartisan, bicameral farm-to-table dinner event with state legislators in Sacramento. Director of Government and Public Policy for the California Fresh Fruit Association, Adam Borchard, highlighted the importance of engaging with state lawmakers about the value of agriculture and challenges that farmers are facing.
The California Fresh Fruit Association is involved in a coalition of ag organizations called the Alliance of California Farmers and Ranchers Community Fund, and it's a 501c3 that educates lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, on the importance of California's agricultural industry and some of the issues that we confront. So part of that is having a farm-to-fork, or what we call farm-to-table dinner, where we showcase the fresh produce that is from California, in particular particularly the capital region, and highlight that location and the nexus to lawmakers here in Sacramento. And it's hugely important. I mean, California is a very diverse state with urban and agricultural regions, but it is important to educate folks that might not understand the importance of agriculture to their constituents, whether that's in manufacturing, processing, or even for nutrition programs.
As National Pollinator Week comes to a close this weekend, the essential role of pollinators will continue to be emphasized and studied. Solitary bees play a crucial role in pollination, particularly for crops like alfalfa. A recent study led by North Dakota State University with participation from USDA's Agricultural Research Service focused on the alfalfa leaf-cutting bee. The project looked at how nesting cavity diameter affects bee conservation and pollination performance. The research found that larger nesting cavities produced bigger bees with greater foraging distances and higher winter survival rates, while medium-sized cavities yielded the highest number of offspring. Smaller cavities were better for conserving other cavity nesting bees, as smaller bees have increased flight power relative to their size. These findings suggest that the size of nesting cavities significantly influences bee body size, provisioning, and overall pollination efficiency. The study highlights the need for pollination managers to select cavity sizes based on specific management goals. Future research will delve further into the advantages and disadvantages of different bee sizes. Several industry groups are fighting back against the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's vehicle emission standards. The Biden administration's standards mandate that 68% of new passenger vehicles and 43% of new medium-duty trucks be electric by 2032. The National Corn Growers Association, American Farm Bureau Federation, 6 auto dealers, and the American Petroleum Institute argue that the EPA exceeded its authority by focusing solely on electric vehicles and neglecting the benefits of corn ethanol in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The groups contend that ethanol is an immediate and effective solution, whereas widespread EV adoption will take decades. The plaintiffs also claim that the EPA's standards will harm farmers by undermining investments in renewable fuels and imposing impractical requirements that increase costs and rely on an insufficient rural charging network. Employers are required to establish, implement, and maintain an effective workplace violence prevention plan as of July 1st. President and CEO of AgSafe, Teresa Keene, highlighted some of the considerations for complying with the regulation.
This is the interesting thing about this workplace violence. Cal OSHA is administering it. It lives there, but it involves more than just your safety professionals. You need to bring in also your HR team and having those conversations, especially when we're talking about keeping logs of training records, but the violence incident logs. If there is an investigation, because it involves personnel and things that have happened. So trying to make sure that employees' information is kept confidential. And so there's all kinds of nuances to this workplace violence prevention plan that employers need to keep in mind.
The National Cotton Council has scheduled the tour dates and locations for the 2024 Producer Information Exchange Program. Sponsored by BASF through a grant to the Cotton Foundation, the PI program has a goal of helping U.S. cotton producers maximize production efficiency and improve yields and fiber quality. Since its launch in 1989, the program's enabled more than 1,200 U.S. cotton producers to go to cotton belt regions different than their own, where they can learn about their peers' innovative production practices. This year, producers from the Mid-South and Southeast will see farming operations in California during the week of July 28th. The second part of this year's tour, set for the week of August 4th, will enable Southwest and West producers to travel to the Southeast and observe farming operations in Georgia. Participants will gain new perspectives on fundamental practices and observe how diverse farming operations adopt new and existing technologies. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
Ways to stay safe when working outdoors in the heat. That's coming up on This End of Hours.
This week, you may be running into heat that is a lot more intense than anything you may have encountered before. And some of your best friends in that case?
Rest, water, and shade.
Especially water. Ohio State University Health and Safety Professor Dee Jepson says drink at least 1 cup of water every 20 minutes.
A lot of times people think, I don't want to drink that much, I'll be sick. If you're really out working in this heat, every 20 minutes, drink a cup of water. You'll feel much better.
Also, wear the lightest, loosest fitting, light-colored clothes you can get away with. And finally, here's one more clothing suggestion.
throw away that beloved ball cap.
Instead, she says, wear hats with at least a 3-inch brim all the way around them.
They block the UV exposure from your face, the top of your ears, the back of your necks. 80% of our skin cancer comes from that part of our body.
Gary Crawford.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and I'm in the Napa County area where the Propane Education and Research Council took a few of us to Fisher Vineyards, who they were giving an award for sustainability. Now, there I talked to the council's Director of Industry Communications, Patrick Hyland. Well, I would like to talk to you about propane use in agriculture. We are out here in a winery in California right now where we have seen a couple of different uses for propane. It's used for keeping his crop at the right temperature. If there's a frost threat, he's got a fan that runs on propane, and also his emergency backup generator runs on propane. What are some other ways that propane is used in agriculture?
Well, even right here at the vineyards, he's got forklifts that run on propane. His HVAC system runs on propane, and that versatility is one of the particular values of propane compared to some of the other energy sources. You can use it with one tank setting, one location for multiple uses, as Rob has discovered here. It helps him from the agricultural perspective. It helps him from his commercial business operation here, and it gives him security, as he's talked about earlier, in the event that there's any kind of power outage to the grid, whether it's just the growing instability of the grid, especially here in California, or the threat of wildfires where they are mandatorily shutting down the grid for everybody without notice and without any specific plans for how long. That's a tough way to run a business if you don't know when your power is going to go out or how long it's going to go out for. Propane is able to provide that backup supply for power generation for indefinite periods of time. It doesn't go bad, unlike diesel, which is used for power generation as well. And again, it can be used for multiple applications on the farm or in a commercial business.
You know, that flexibility is really interesting in a fuel, to be able to use it for so many different ways. Is it difficult, though, to change from using other fuels to propane?
No, actually, the conversion has been very simple for a long time. Propane's been around for over 120 years, right? So people have used it for a long time on the farms. You know, they were using it for tractor operations. They were using it to run any kind of engines that they needed, be it irrigation engines, be it grain dryers, be it all kinds of on-the-farm specific uses, or, you know, even in the residential application, so lawnmowers, heating the homes, heating water, depending on what kind of farm you have, right? You need large volumes of water heated. Propane's an efficient way to do that. The farming community overall is one of the oldest and most reliable users of propane in the history of the industry itself. It goes way back. It's been a standard way before we got into some of the more current applications, and we're always looking for new applications, but the farm has always been the backbone of the history of the industry. Over 700,000 farms across the industry use propane for one thing or another, and most are finding that if we have it already there in supply, we already have it piped, it's an advantage for us to maximize those uses and find ways to convert old expiring diesel engines, for example, in the field, right, that you got to replace anyways. These are cheaper in the fuel costs, up to 40% cheaper. They're cleaner environmentally for you, and they save you operational costs in the long run of the life of the unit. So it makes a lot of sense to convert, and a lot of conversions happen pretty naturally for those reasons.
You brought it up, but that was going to be my next question was, you know, here in California especially, fuel costs. Everybody thinks about fuel costs all the time because it is a huge cost, especially for an agricultural business. How does propane compare in fuel costs?
Well, generally speaking, propane runs about 40% cheaper than the cost of diesel. Now, those prices obviously fluctuate all the time. Historically, one of the challenges for the propane industry 10 years or so ago was that the price was a little volatile. It would jump up and jump down, and that was a little hard for people to plan around, right? Ever since we started with the shales extraction and the added production of propane domestically, we have increased the domestic supply of propane, and one of the implications from that is it has stabilized the price of propane. We're not relying on the imports that tended to make the prices go up and down very dramatically depending on what was going on, type cost of year, all that kind of stuff. So the prices now are much more stable than they ever were, much less subjective to those price spikes and falls. And that has enabled us to stay very consistently at 40% less than the cost of diesel. And most of the engines that we're looking to replace are diesel engines on the farm.
So for farmers who are listening to this, thinking they might want to check it out, they're thinking about converting to diesel, or they're thinking about converting to propane, what should they do next?
Well, there's all kinds of information about propane utilization on the farm at our website, and that is very simply propane.com. There is a specific tab for all the farm applications, and if you're looking for irrigation engine specifics, there's a section for that. If you're looking for grain drying, there's a section for that, and on and on and on. There's probably more information there than you could possibly know what to do, but we can hook you up with specific OEMs for if you need specific equipment, if you need help assessing what your opportunities are for propane equipment in any of those applications. We're more than happy to get in touch with you and help you work through that. And we're also happy to hook you up with a local propane provider in your neighborhood, somebody who's there in your community and has, I'm sure, been serving the community probably for a couple generations if they're the typical propane retailer.
Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
You're certainly welcome. Good talking to you.
That again, the Director of Industry Communications, Patrick Hyland with PERC. We will hear from Rob Fisher of Fisher Vineyards coming up next. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. The Propane Education and Research Council, or PERC, invited me to its event in Napa County this week, where it presented Fisher Vineyards with a Sustainability Award. For today's featured interview, I'm talking with Rob Fisher about the award and also about other things like how wildfire impacts his business. Here is our conversation.
I'm Rob Fisher, CEO for Fisher Vineyards.
So we are out here at your vineyard, which is beautiful in Sonoma County, and we were talking today about propane. Is it okay if I ask you questions other than propane-related questions too?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. All right, well, but let's start out with that for the reason that we're here. And you had been talking about some... I wanted to start out with talking about like your emergency backup power, because that's extremely important for wineries. What do you do in a situation where all of a sudden you lose power?
Immediately, we go to backup power, and that tends to be within 10 minutes. We often are losing power in hot weather conditions, and it's critical for us to keep our barrel cellars cool, keep our fermentations moving if this is happening during harvest season. We had looked at automated transfer switches, which were not practical for us given the way the primary engineering of the power was built. So we have a manual transfer switch, but it allows us to transfer quickly.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to ask you about the fan that you have out here, or the...
Vineyard fan.
Vineyard fan,
yeah,
okay.
Vineyard fan,
all right, so, and it was mentioned earlier when we were doing our tour, but it does look quite a bit like what I grew up with, because I grew up around a lot of orange groves. It looks like the fans that they use to keep the frost off the oranges. Is it used in the same way?
Absolutely. Used in the same way. I don't know that it's used at the same time when I think about citrus being right. Well, and even I don't know if it's in the same maturation point, but for us, when vines are coming out of dormancy, the buds and the shoots, the new shoots, are very sensitive to temperature and especially frost. So short of moving the air, which allows us to protect down to about 30 degrees, the only other alternative we have is water. And in some setups, we're able to sprinkle with water so that the small buds are encapsulated in ice. and ice actually will hold the temperature at 31, 32 degrees, which is better than dropping to 25 degrees if you're having a hard freeze. But we tend to be, first layer of defense is air movement. So vineyard fans that are propane powered, yeah.
And so each of these fans has their own propane tank, right?
Yes. Each one's individually powered. We are able to cover about 10 acres. The way we're configured, it allows the air to flow that way. It really depends on the topography of where you're farming. And if you have a slope that's allowing cold air to dissipate, then you sort of have the natural flow of cold air helping you. There are also things such that are vertical fans that take cold air and actually blow it vertical and creates a plume that cycles cold air high into the atmosphere, drops warm air down. And so we have some vertical fans as opposed to blowing air horizontally. So we use both.
And then there are other things here on your property that are also focused on using propane. What are some of those?
So backup power is sort of the crucial thing. Of course, we also use propane in material handling with our forklifts. We use it for HVAC throughout the building. The backup power is crucial because it both chills and provides movement for our warm glycol system. So we use the same glycol system from our chiller is also used for warm glycol that heats our fermentations at the start of harvest going into primary fermentation.
I wanted to move off of the propane topic for a minute if we can and just discuss some other things. I know that right now top of mind for people when they think of California and they think of especially this area of California is going to be wildfires. And it looks like I have seen some wildfire damage not too far from your property. Is this something that you worry about every year?
We absolutely worry about it every year. Every year starting about a decade ago. And it's something that we now insure regularly around in terms of crop insurance. Of course, testing around smoke damage is becoming better understood. It's still not perfect, but we're looking forward to more advancement around that and more financial protections around it too.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We're talking with Rob Fisher of Fisher Vineyards, which is located in Napa County near Calistoga. I wanted to ask you about smoke damage to the grapes because I know that, with grapes with having been such a thin skin and then every flavor profile being so important for all wines, what can smoke damage do to your crop?
It can completely ruin the crop. There really is no amount of smoke evidence that's positive. Any smoke evidence is really damaging, and so it really is a factor of the skin of the grape respiring, breathing in the volatile smoke and binding to elements in the skin and in the juice that damages the harvest. So it's kind of binary. It's any amount is damaging.
And so the fire doesn't have to actually get your vineyard. It just has to be close enough that you get some smoke.
Close enough to get smoke. We're learning more and more each year, and a number of places are hard at work with research on this. But we're starting to find, I think, that it's fresh smoke that's the most damaging. It tends to be more volatile and can bind more easily to the fruit itself. Acrid smoke that's had days in the atmosphere, maybe blowing from other counties, other states. It appears has less of an immediate impact, but I think there's more work to be done to totally understand that.
You mentioned insurance earlier. Is it difficult to get insurance for your agricultural land in this area?
It's not difficult to get it. Of course, like anything you shop for, we want a competitive market, and I do worry that over time claims may drive up the cost of that insurance. So we remain optimistic that it stays a competitive market.
Is there a difference in insuring your agricultural land versus insuring like a private home as far as the availability of insurance goes? I know that in the wildfire areas, it's been a difficult topic.
Totally unrelated from home insurance, yeah. And so it is USDA-backed, often, and federally managed agricultural crop insurance that we're pursuing.
Does the crop insurance cover your buildings as well?
No.
So if you lose your land to fire, the crop itself is covered, but all of the work that you put into your buildings, everything you've put in there, won't be covered by that USDA insurance, right?
So, yeah, buildings are totally separate from any of the crop insurance. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, I think there have been some modifications to the state Cal Fair plan as insurer of last resort. It allowed certain farm buildings to qualify for insurance through that program. Of course, we'd like to see an expanded and robust competitive private market come back as well.
Because I've talked with other people in the agriculture industry, ranchers primarily, in wildfire areas who have had a significant problem with having all of their property actually covered for wildfire. And it's a concern, being a Californian myself, I know how much of wildfires is a concern every year. So with that, people around the nation watch our California wildfires, and to help it ring true to them how much that this can impact a business like yours, what would you say to them?
It's a real threat, and it's one that's we've already been through, I would say, a challenging set of years, really starting in 2017 through 2020. There were fires really every one of those years that impacted Sonoma and Napa areas. Fingers crossed, we've had a few good years now, but I think all of these support services around ag and for us specifically wine and vineyard agriculture is going to be crucial for ensuring the stability of small family growers and wineries going forward.
All right, I want to switch topics a little bit to something that's a little bit happier, and I want to hear about your connections to one of the states that I broadcast in, and that is Michigan. So tell me, how is your family connected to Michigan?
Yes, so my great-grandfather was one of the 7 Fisher brothers to found Fisher Body by Fisher, and it is family history and heritage that we carry on proudly through one of our labels, which is Coach Insignia. The Coach refers back to the original coach building business they started in Ohio and moved up to Michigan early 1900s. And we think of that Coach Insignia Cabernet as our flagship wine, and in many ways sort of my father's namesake wine here at Fisher Vineyards.
So for people listening in Michigan, are they able to purchase that?
They are able to purchase that. It is limited in availability at retail. We can also take orders by phone and online to ship wine to many states, including Michigan.
And if they wanted to find you online, how would they do that?
FisherVineyards.com is the easiest place. You can find us Fisher Vineyards on Instagram as well, and happy to take phone calls and emails.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like for our listeners to know, either about your wine, about the winemaking business, about being in agriculture in California, or about your family roots?
We just appreciate listeners all supporting small family growers. For us, that's wine, but agriculture in general, and would love to have you visit us out here. We do schedule appointments privately, both in Napa and Sonoma. We have a winery on each of our properties in both regions, and look forward to welcoming you out here.
That again, Rob Fisher of Fisher Vineyard. Thank you to him, and thank you to the Propane Education and Research Council for sending me out to that event to learn more about his vineyard and sustainability using propane. That is today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.